Introduction: Two Fathers, Two Financial Worlds. Robert Kiyosaki grew up in Hawaii with what he calls two dads. One was his real father, a highly educated man with a stable government job, who believed in getting good grades, finding a secure job, and climbing the career ladder. This was his poor dad. The other was his best friend Mike's father, a man with little formal education but sharp business instincts, who owned companies and invested in real estate. This was his rich dad. Their lives gave Robert a living experiment. Two intelligent men, two very different philosophies about money, and two completely different outcomes. Poor dad believed the path to success was go to school, get good grades, get a safe job, work hard, save money, buy a house, and hope to retire comfortably. Rich dad believed something else entirely. Learn how money really works, build assets, make money work for you, and never depend on a single paycheck. From childhood, Robert heard two sets of advice about work, education, risk, and security. One father said, "I can't afford that." The other said, "How can I afford that?" One said, "The love of money is the root of all evil." The other said, "The lack of money is the root of all evil." These opposite messages forced Robert to question which philosophy actually led to freedom. As he watched their lives unfold, the results spoke louder than words. Poor dad climbed the education ladder, earned promotions, and had a respectable title. But he constantly struggled with bills, taxes, and debt. Rich dad built businesses, bought investments, and over time became one of the wealthiest men in their area. Robert realized that financial success wasn't about how intelligent you are in school. It was about how financially educated you are in real life. This book, and this audiobook you're listening to, is the story of those lessons. How Rich Dad trained him to think differently about money, work, and freedom. Chapter 1. The Rich Don't Work for Money. When Robert was 9 years old, he and his best friend, Mike, wanted to be rich. They saw classmates with new bikes and fancy things their families could not afford. Instead of just complaining, they asked a bold question. "Mike, how can we get rich?" That question led them to Mike's father, Rich Dad. When they asked him directly if he would teach them how to become rich, he didn't give them a motivational speech or a lecture. He simply said, "If you want to learn from me, you must work for me." He hired them at one of his small grocery stores, paying them just 10 cents an hour for 3 hours every Saturday. The work was boring, cleaning shelves, dusting canned goods, doing menial tasks. After 3 weeks, Robert was angry. Other kids were playing while he was working for almost nothing. He felt exploited and decided to quit. Poor dad agreed. "You should demand more money. You're being underpaid." But when Robert went to confront Rich Dad, expecting sympathy or a raise, Rich Dad did something unexpected. He made the pay even lower. He offered to let Robert keep working for free. Robert was shocked. Work for no money? It sounded insane. But this was the moment Rich Dad wanted to create. He wanted Robert to feel the frustration that most people feel all their lives. Working hard, feeling underpaid, trapped, and powerless. Only then could he teach the deeper lesson. Most people, Rich Dad explained, work for money and let their emotions, fear and desire, control them. Fear of not having money pushes them to accept low pay and boring jobs. Desire for a few nice things keeps them chasing small raises and promotions. They stay stuck in the rat race. Rich Dad told him, "The poor and the middle class work for money. The rich have money work for them." The job at the store was never about the 10 cents an hour. It was a classroom. Rich Dad wanted Robert to see that if your only strategy is work harder for more pay, you will always be controlled by whoever signs your paycheck. The path to wealth begins when you stop asking, "How can I earn more per hour?" and start asking, "How can I create or buy something that earns money while I'm not there?" To drive this home, Rich Dad started teaching them to look for opportunities others ignored. In the same store where they were working, He showed them how unsold comic books were thrown away. Robert and Mike realized they could collect these comics and open a small comic book library for neighborhood kids, charging a few cents for unlimited reading time. They did the work once, organizing the comics, and then the little business earned money repeatedly, even when they were not present. It wasn't a huge success, but it was their first taste of making money work for them instead of trading hours for dollars. Rich Dad emphasized that the real trap for most adults is emotional. Fear of being broke keeps them running back to job security. As soon as they get a raise, desire kicks in. So they buy a newer car, a bigger house, nicer clothes. Expenses rise with income, so they stay broke at a higher level. They call this making progress, but financially, they are in the same cage. Rich Dad called this cycle the rat race, running faster and faster on the same wheel, never reaching freedom. The lesson of Chapter 1 is not that work is bad. Rich Dad was not telling Robert to be lazy. He wanted him to understand that a job should be a training ground, not a lifelong cage. The rich also work, but their main goal is to gain skills, see patterns, and build or acquire assets that generate income. They use jobs as temporary platforms to learn sales, management, markets, systems. Once they see opportunities, they start shifting their focus from working for money to building things that pay them whether they work or not. In simple words, Rich Dad's first lesson was this: if you let fear and desire control your decisions, you will always be someone else's employee, no matter how high your salary. When you learn to observe your emotions, think clearly, and look for ways to make money work for you, you step onto the path that only the rich follow. This change doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with a mental shift, from asking, how can I get a better job, to asking, how can I build or buy an asset that pays me every month? At the end of Chapter 1, Robert chooses which father's path to follow. Poor Dad told him to stay in school, get a degree, and find stable employment. Rich Dad told him to keep learning how money works, to study business, investing, and markets. Robert decided to keep learning from Rich Dad, and that decision shaped his entire life. In the rest of the book, and in the next chapters of this audiobook, the lessons become more concrete. What assets really are, how to escape the rat race, and how ordinary people can build freedom step by step. Chapter 2. Why Teach Financial Literacy? Robert opens this chapter with a simple but brutal observation. It's not how much money you make that matters, it's how much you keep, how hard that money works for you, and how many generations it lasts. People think higher income will solve their problems. Yet he saw doctors, lawyers, and executives earning six figures who were still living paycheck to paycheck. Their problem wasn't income. It was ignorance about how money really flows in and out of their lives. That ignorance kept them trapped in the rat race, regardless of salary. Rich Dad's answer was clear. The foundation of wealth is financial literacy. Schools teach you how to read, write, and do math, but almost never how to read a financial statement. You may learn algebra and Shakespeare, but not how to understand cash flow, assets, liabilities, and income statements. Poor Dad had a PhD and a prestigious career, yet struggled financially. Rich Dad never finished 8th grade, but could read numbers on a financial statement the way a mechanic reads an engine. He believed that if you can't read numbers, you can't see when you're in danger, and you certainly can't see opportunities. To make this real, Kiyosaki describes the standard life script of the middle class. A young couple gets married and rents a small apartment. With 2 incomes, they feel they're doing fine and even saving a little. Soon the apartment feels cramped, so they decide to buy a house. Their incomes rise, and the bank happily offers a big mortgage. They buy their dream home, believing it's their greatest asset. Then come children, a bigger car, better furniture, vacations, and credit cards. As income increases, expenses and debts increase even faster. They think they're getting ahead, but their cash flow statement shows a different reality. Almost all of their income flows straight out to taxes, mortgage payments, car loans, credit cards, and everyday expenses. Rich Dad calls this being trapped in a rat race. Each raise is swallowed by new monthly payments. Each new asset is actually a liability that takes money out of their pocket. They are working harder, but not becoming freer. Without financial literacy, they can't see that their house, car, and lifestyle are not building wealth. They're consuming it. They feel safe because they own a home and have a good job, yet they're one layoff or medical emergency away from crisis. The numbers on their personal financial statement, if they ever wrote one, would reveal a fragile situation disguised as success. Here, Rich Dad introduces the most important idea in the entire book: the difference between an asset and a liability. In traditional accounting, an asset is something you own that has value, and a liability is something you owe. Rich Dad simplifies this for ordinary people. An asset is anything that puts money into your pocket, month after month. A liability is anything that takes money out of your pocket, month after month. That's it. Forget complex formulas. If it generates cash for you, it's an asset. If it drains cash from you, it's a liability. With this simple definition, many things people brag about owning suddenly shift categories. Your personal residence? For most people, it's a liability. It creates mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance, repairs, and upgrades, all of which flow out of your pocket. A new car bought on finance? Liability. Designer clothes on a credit card? Liability. Even a high-income career can become a liability if it keeps you dependent on a single paycheck and motivates you to increase your lifestyle instead of your assets. So what are true assets in Rich Dad's world? Things like rental real estate that produces positive cash flow after all expenses, businesses or side hustles that run without you being there 24/7, dividend-paying stocks, and well-chosen index funds, royalties from books, music, software, or content you create, intellectual property, and systems that can be licensed or scaled. These assets don't just hold value, they actively put money into your pocket on a regular basis. The rich focus obsessively on building their asset column. They use their paycheck not to buy liabilities, but to buy or create assets. Over time, the cash flow from those assets begins to cover their living expenses. That's when they start stepping out of the rat race. Kiyosaki gives a powerful illustration with 3 simple financial diagrams: one for the poor, one for the middle class, and one for the rich. The poor have income that goes straight to expenses: rent, food, transport. No assets, no savings. The middle class add liabilities: mortgage, car loans, credit cards. Their income flows into liabilities and expenses. Their asset column is still empty. The rich use their income to buy assets first. Those assets then generate more income, which buys more assets. Their expense line stays relatively stable while their asset column grows and their cash flow increases. To prove that high income alone doesn't guarantee wealth, Kiyosaki mentions famous businessmen from the 1920s who earned fortunes but died broke or in debt. Their problem wasn't their earning power, it was their lack of discipline and financial intelligence. Without the skills to manage, protect, and grow money, even huge amounts slip through your fingers. The same pattern repeats with lottery winners and athletes who lose millions. Money magnifies your habits. If you are financially illiterate, more money just amplifies the chaos. Rich Dad's advice to young Robert and Mike was blunt. If you want to be rich, you must know how to read numbers. You must understand cash flow. You must know the difference between an asset and a liability, and by assets. He wasn't impressed by job titles or degrees. He cared about the story your financial statement told. Did your money flow into assets, or did it get swallowed by liabilities and expenses? He believed that a person with modest income but strong financial literacy could become rich, while a high earner without literacy would stay trapped. In practical terms, Chapter 2 is asking you to change the way you see every purchase. Instead of asking, "Can I afford the payment?" ask, "Is this an asset or a liability? Does it put money in my pocket or take it out?" Rich Dad taught that before you buy luxuries, you should first build a base of assets whose cash flow can pay for those luxuries. The rich let their assets buy their toys. The middle class let their paychecks buy their toys, and then spend their lives working to keep up with the bills. By the end of the chapter, Kiyosaki makes his conclusion clear. Financial literacy is not optional if you want true freedom. You don't need to become a professional accountant, but you must understand enough to read your own numbers, build your own asset column, and avoid the traps that keep so many hard-working people broke. Chapter 2 sets the rule for the rest of the book and for your life. Learn the language of money, focus relentlessly on acquiring real assets, and never again confuse liabilities with wealth. Chapter 3. Mind Your Own Business. The title of this chapter sounds like an insult, but for Rich Dad, it was a formula for freedom. When he told Robert, "Mind your own business," he wasn't saying, "Stay out of other people's lives." He meant something deeper. Don't spend your whole life building other people's wealth while neglecting your own. Do your job well, but never forget that your real business is your asset column. Robert noticed that almost everyone around him had the same pattern. They introduced themselves by their profession. "I'm a teacher, I'm an engineer, I'm a nurse, I'm a manager." Their identity and focus were their job title and their salary. They worked year after year, making their employer's business stronger. But at the end of their career, they often had very little that truly belonged to them. No strong assets, no serious passive income. Their business had always been someone else's. Rich Dad drew a simple picture for him. On one side, your employer's income statement and balance sheet. On the other, your personal ones. Every day you go to work, you are helping to build the asset column of the company you work for. You are helping your boss buy more real estate, more equipment, more investments. You are building their system. This is not evil. It's just how business works. But if you never build your own asset column at the same time, you will retire with a resume instead of real wealth. To drive the point home, Rich Dad often told a story about a famous entrepreneur who visited a group of business students and asked, "What business am I in?" The students laughed and said, "You're in the hamburger business." He replied, "No, my real business is real estate. The hamburgers were just a product." The true engine of his wealth was the land under every restaurant, bought and controlled by his company. That land, in prime locations all over the world, became one of the largest and most valuable real estate portfolios in history. Rich Dad wanted Robert to see the same pattern in his own life. Your job might be teaching, medicine, programming, design, or customer service, but your business should be the assets you are accumulating in the background. For most people, the problem is that they confuse their profession with their business. They pour all their time and energy into the profession and ignore the business. When they stop working, their income stops too, because nothing was quietly growing on the side. He contrasted again the three groups. The poor have no assets and no real business. All income goes to basic expenses. The middle class build a business for the bank and credit card companies. Their cash flow feeds mortgages, car loans, and consumer debt. Their assets are mostly liabilities that lose value. The rich use their profession as a launching pad while they steadily build a separate asset base, businesses, real estate, investments, that will one day replace their salary. Rich Dad warned about a trap he saw everywhere: lifestyle inflation. People get a promotion or a raise and almost immediately upgrade their car, their house, their holidays, their wardrobe. From the outside, it looks like progress. On a financial statement, it's a step backward. Their income went up, but their obligations went up even faster. He called this getting deeper into the rat race with a better view. The rich flip the script. When income rises, they increase the amount that goes into assets, not the amount that goes into lifestyle. Only when their assets are producing solid, reliable cash flow do they allow themselves real luxuries. And even then, those luxuries are paid for by the assets, not by the paycheck. Robert shares how Rich Dad taught him to apply this even while he still had regular jobs. When Robert was in the Marines and later working in sales at Xerox, Rich Dad told him, "Keep your day job, for now. Show up, learn, and do well. But never forget to mind your own business. Use part of every paycheck to buy or build assets. Study deals. Look at properties. Learn the language of investing. Your boss may think you work for him, but in your mind you should know you are working for your asset column." So what does minding your own business actually look like in practice? It means setting up your personal finances so that month after month, year after year, your asset column is growing, even if just a little at first. Instead of just asking, "How can I earn more in my job?" you also ask, "How much did my assets grow this month? What did I buy or build that will pay me again next month, next year, and 10 years from now?" It might start as small as buying one low-cost index fund, one inexpensive rental property, or building one tiny online product. The amounts don't matter at the beginning. The direction does. Rich Dad also insisted that you should choose asset types you genuinely like. "If you don't love it, you won't take care of it," he told Robert. Some people love real estate, driving neighborhoods, analyzing deals, fixing places up. Others love stocks and studying businesses. Others enjoy building digital products, brands, or channels. When you enjoy the asset class, you're more likely to stay with it through the boring parts and the inevitable problems. Passion keeps you in the game long enough for compound growth to start working. He gave another clear warning about luxuries. Most people, when they feel bored or stressed, reward themselves by buying something shiny on credit: a new phone, a car upgrade, designer clothes. At first it feels like freedom, but the monthly payments quietly chain them to their job. Rich Dad's rule was different. First grow your asset column. Then let the income from those assets pay for your luxuries. That way, when you buy the car or the trip, you're not killing your future. You're spending the harvest from trees you have already planted. By the end of Chapter 3, the message is sharp. You may be an employee on paper, but you must start thinking like an owner in your personal finances. Keep your job as long as you need it, but stop treating it as your final destination. Your real business is your growing list of assets, the things that will keep sending you money whether you show up to an office or not. When you begin to measure success not by your job title or salary, but by the strength of your asset column and the stability of your cash flow, you have started to mind your own business the way the rich do. And that shift over years is what quietly moves you out of the rat race. Chapter 4: The History of Taxes and the Power of Corporations. When Robert was a boy, one of the first stories he heard in school was the legend of Robin Hood, the heroic outlaw who stole from the rich and gave to the poor. His teachers loved the story. His classmates cheered for Robin Hood. But when he told the story to his rich dad, the reaction was completely different. Rich Dad didn't smile. He didn't clap for the hero. He simply said Robin Hood was a crook. For Robert, this was confusing. How could someone who helped the poor be a villain? Rich Dad explained that the real danger of the Robin Hood idea is not the man with the bow and arrow. It is the philosophy behind him, the belief that it is noble and fair to take from the rich and give to the poor. Once that idea takes root in the minds of voters, governments eventually use it to justify more and more taxes. At first, the promise is always the same. We will only tax the rich. We will use their money to help the poor. But, as Rich Dad pointed out, that is not how the story ends in real life. In ancient times, there were often no permanent income taxes at all. Kings and rulers collected money in times of war or crisis. Then the taxes were supposed to disappear. Over centuries, taxes became permanent and spread wider. What began as a tool to punish the rich slowly expanded until the burden fell hardest on the working middle class, the employees and professionals who earn high salaries but have little financial power. The rich, who understood laws and money, learned to adapt. They found legal ways to reduce or delay taxes, while the middle class kept paying more. Poor Dad believed in that Robin Hood philosophy. As a government employee and educated man, he truly thought higher taxes on the rich were the fairest way to support schools, roads, and social programs. When he heard about new tax increases, he said, "Good. The rich should pay their share." Rich Dad saw the same policies from the opposite side. He believed governments, once they get a taste for tax money, never stop wanting more. "Your dad and I are opposite types," he told Robert. "He gets paid to spend money and hire more people. I get rewarded when I keep expenses low and use money efficiently. Our incentives are not the same." The key lesson Rich Dad wanted Robert to see was this: every time ordinary people vote to tax the rich don't just sit there and accept it. They react. They study the rules, hire the best professionals, and restructure their affairs. They use companies, trusts, and legal strategies to protect their money. Over time, the extra tax burden rarely lands on the truly rich. It lands on employees and small business owners who do not understand the system. This is where Rich Dad introduced what he called one of the biggest secrets of the wealthy: the corporation. He described it not as a cold machine, but as a powerful invention, an artificial legal person that could own property, do business, borrow money, and pay taxes, all while shielding its human owners from many risks. Over hundreds of years, the rich learned to use corporations the way knights once used armor, not to avoid the battle, but to protect themselves while they fought. Robert began to see the difference in a simple formula. An employee's cash flow looks like this: earn, taxed, spend whatever is left. Money comes in as a salary. Before the employee ever sees it, taxes are taken out. Only then does the person pay rent, food, transport, and everything else. A corporation's cash flow, by contrast, looks like this: earn, spend on allowable business expenses, pay tax on what remains. The company receives income, then legally spends on salaries, travel, equipment, insurance, retirement plans, and many operational costs. Only after these expenses does it pay tax on the remainder. Same law, different position in the game. The employee works all year, and then the government takes a slice off the top. The corporation structures its activities so that many things ordinary people pay with after-tax money can be paid with pre-tax money. Rich Dad stressed that this is not about cheating or evasion. It is about education. The tax code is a set of incentives. Governments want businesses to provide jobs, housing, energy, and innovation, so they build in advantages for those who take those risks. The rich learn those rules and play the game at that level. The financially uneducated stay on the simplest level. They trade time for money, accept being taxed first, and hope there is enough left over. For a young Robert, all of this felt intimidating. Corporations sounded like something only giant companies used. But Rich Dad broke it down. A corporation, he said, is just a legal container. It can be as small as a one-person company that owns a rental property, holds intellectual property, or runs a small business. The point is not size, The point is control. When your income flows through entities you control, you have more options for how and when you are taxed and how you protect your assets from lawsuits and emergencies. To make the contrast clearer, Rich Dad described what happens when a highly paid professional gets a big raise. Their salary goes up. Because it is salary, their tax bracket often goes up too. Governments see them as rich, so a larger percentage of each additional dollar is taken. Banks now see higher income and are happy to offer bigger mortgages and car loans. The professional feels richer and upgrades house, car, and lifestyle. But on their personal cash flow diagram, most of their additional income is already committed to taxes and long-term debt. They are running faster on the same wheel. Meanwhile, a financially educated person might also get a raise, but instead of expanding their lifestyle, they use the surplus to buy more assets inside a corporation, another rental apartment, a small online business, or shares in a productive company. The corporation can often deduct many related expenses. Over time, the cash flow from those assets starts paying for their life. The tax system, which punishes the uninformed, quietly rewards the educated. Rich Dad then connected this chapter back to the core message of the book. Working harder at your job is not enough. You must increase your financial IQ. For him, financial intelligence includes at least 4 key skills: understanding numbers and accounting well enough to read financial statements, understanding investing, how to evaluate and acquire assets, understanding markets, how supply, demand, and psychology create opportunities, understanding the law, especially taxes and corporate structures. Most people only focus on the first half of the first skill, if that. They stop at, I get paid X per month, and never learn to see the bigger picture. The rich, by contrast, invest time and money in learning the last part, taxes and corporations, because that's where the hidden leverage lies. It's important to note that Kiyosaki is not saying everyone should rush out and create complex structures tomorrow. The point of Chapter 4 is awareness. Realize that the game of money has different levels. If you stay at the employee level only, you pay the highest price in both taxes and control. If you gradually learn to use business entities and investment vehicles, you can keep more of what you earn and redeploy it into assets that buy your freedom. By the end of the chapter, Robert sees why his 2 fathers viewed the world so differently. Poor Dad, working inside government, trusted that higher taxes on the rich would create fairness. Rich Dad, operating as a business owner, saw how those same policies often ended up squeezing the middle class, while the truly wealthy adapted and moved their money behind stronger walls. The lesson for Robert, and for you, is not to be angry, but to be educated. The rules already exist. You can complain about them, or you can learn them and use them wisely. The takeaway of Chapter 4, then, is simple but powerful. If you want real financial freedom, you must do more than work for money. You must learn the rules of taxes and corporations well enough to protect what you earn, direct how it is used, and multiply it through assets. The rich are not just lucky or greedy. They are often better students of the system. When you decide to become a serious student of that system too, you stop playing the money game as a defenseless employee and start playing it as an informed owner. Chapter 5. The Rich Invent Money. By the time Robert reached his 20s, he had understood 2 big lessons. The rich don't work for money, and they focus on building assets instead of collecting liabilities. But there was still a question that bothered him. How do the rich keep finding profitable opportunities that others never seem to see? Everyone reads the same news, lives in the same economy, yet some people constantly create money, while others constantly struggle. Rich Dad's answer was simple and uncomfortable. Opportunities are seen with the mind, not with the eyes. The rich are not lucky, they are prepared, and they are creative. The rich invent money. Most people, Rich Dad explained, have a passive relationship with money. They wait for a paycheck, wait for a promotion, wait for the government to change, wait for the economy to improve. They see themselves as victims of external forces. The rich, on the other hand, treat money like a game of strategy. They study the rules, practice the skills, and then actively look for angles that others miss. Where the average person sees risk and says, "That's dangerous," the rich ask, what skills or information would turn this danger into an opportunity? To make this real, Rich Dad told Robert about times when markets crashed. When stock prices fell or real estate values dropped, most people panicked. They said, "I've lost money," and swore never to invest again. The rich, however, saw sales. They had kept some cash or credit available, and when prices fell, they went shopping. Their preparation, cash, knowledge, and courage allowed them to invent profits during periods when everyone else felt only fear. The market didn't hate one group and love another. It simply presented volatility. Those with financial intelligence turned that volatility into income. Robert realized that there were two kinds of risk. The first is real risk, entering a deal you don't understand, with money you can't afford to lose, based on rumors or emotions. The second is perceived risk, something that looks scary from the outside, but becomes manageable when you have skills and information. For someone who has never driven a car, a highway full of vehicles is terrifying. For an experienced driver, it's just a normal commute. The road hasn't changed, the driver has. Money works the same way. Kiyosaki confesses in this chapter that at school he was not the smartest kid in traditional subjects. But Rich Dad showed him that in the real world there is another kind of intelligence, financial IQ. It is built from four main ingredients: accounting, investing, understanding markets, and understanding the law. And it can be developed with practice. When your financial IQ rises, you start to see patterns, undervalued assets, poorly managed properties, businesses with potential mispriced deals that most people walk past without noticing. That is what Rich Dad meant when he said the rich invent money. They combine knowledge and creativity to manufacture opportunities. One of Robert's early experiences showed him this clearly. At one point, he was struggling with money as a young adult. Instead of saying, "I can't afford it," he remembered Rich Dad's rule. Never say, "I can't afford it." Always ask, "How can I afford it?" That small change of wording forced his brain to look for solutions instead of shutting down. He began scanning newspaper ads for properties, talking to agents, and running numbers. Most deals were bad. Many were boring. But then, after looking at dozens of listings, he found a small property that had sat on the market for months. The price was low because it looked ugly and needed work, but the cash flow numbers, rent minus expenses, actually worked. He negotiated hard, structured creative financing with a small amount down, fixed a few cosmetic issues, and quickly found tenants. Soon the property was paying for itself and leaving extra cash every month. Later, when the market improved, he sold it for more than he had paid. None of this came from magic. The money was invented by seeing what others didn't, being willing to learn, and taking calculated action instead of freezing. Rich Dad stressed that creativity with money is like creativity with music or art. You develop it by doing, not by just thinking. People say, "I'm not creative," but what they really mean is, "I've never trained this part of myself." The rich force themselves into situations where they must think creatively. They look at a property and ask, "How could I reuse this?" They look at a business and ask, "What system is missing here that I could build?" They look at a skill and ask, "Who else would pay for this knowledge?" Over time, their brain becomes used to turning problems into projects and projects into profit. A big part of this chapter is also about taking action while still learning. Kiyosaki notes that most people know they should invest or start something, but they hesitate for years, waiting to feel ready. They read books, watch videos, and talk endlessly, but never place a small, real bet. Rich Dad warned that this perfectionism is just fear in disguise. You learn to ride a bicycle by riding a bicycle, he said. In the same way, you learn to spot deals by actually analyzing and trying small deals. Start small, start safe, but start. Without real-world attempts, your knowledge stays theoretical, and theoretical knowledge does not invent money. Kiyosaki also points out that the rich often use other people's resources, what he abbreviates as OPM, other people's money, other people's management, other people's time. When they see an opportunity but lack cash, they know how to raise funds, bring in partners, or negotiate terms. When they find a good property but don't want to manage tenants, they hire property managers. When they start a business, they build systems so employees can run daily operations. The average person says, "I can't do this because I don't have X." The rich ask, "Who has X? And how can we work together so we both win?" This doesn't mean recklessly using credit cards or gambling with borrowed money. Rich Dad was clear. Debt used for consumption destroys you. Debt used wisely to acquire solid, cash-flowing assets can accelerate your journey. The difference is again education and discipline. If you don't understand what you're doing, leverage multiplies your mistakes. If you do understand, leverage multiplies your successes. The tool is neutral. Your knowledge and character determine the outcome. As the chapter closes, Robert summarizes the mindset shift. Most people say, "I wish I had a chance," after the chance has already passed. They see a neighborhood that has gone up in value and say, "If only I had bought there 5 years ago." They see a business someone else grew and sold and say, "I had that idea once." The rich are not waiting for a perfect, risk-free signal. They are steadily training themselves every week to look, to analyze, to think creatively, and to act in small ways. When a bigger opportunity appears, they recognize it faster because it looks like a bigger version of something they have already practiced on a smaller scale. The main message of Chapter 5 is that you will not get out of the rat race by working harder at the same game. At some point, you must start playing a different game, the game of creating and spotting opportunities, of using knowledge and creativity to invent money where others see nothing. That doesn't happen because you are special. It happens because you refuse to say, "I can't." You constantly ask, "How can I?" And you give yourself permission to learn by doing. Over years, those small creative moves compound into a life that looks, from the outside, like luck, when in reality, it was financial intelligence in action. Chapter 6. Work to learn, don't work for money. By this point in the story, Robert had already broken several rules of the traditional career path. He had left a secure job at Xerox, stepped into the world of investing and entrepreneurship, and experienced both wins and painful mistakes. People around him thought he was reckless. "Why don't you just settle down, keep your good job, and be grateful?" they asked. For them, the purpose of work was obvious. You work to get a paycheck. For Rich Dad, the purpose of work was different. You work to learn. The money is secondary. Rich Dad would repeat the same line again and again. Most people focus on the size of the paycheck. The rich focus on the size of the skill set. Poor Dad always encouraged Robert to look for secure employment with good benefits and a clear ladder of promotion. He valued specialization, becoming a high-level expert in one field and letting the company handle everything else. Rich Dad, in contrast, urged Robert to become a generalist in the real-world skills that create and control money: sales, marketing, systems, leadership, and investing. "If you want to be rich," he said, "you need to know a little about a lot." Kiyosaki admits he once fell into the same trap as many ambitious professionals. After leaving the Marines, he joined Xerox Corporation and became a salesperson. At first, he was terrible at selling. He hated rejection, dreaded cold calls, and barely made any commissions. But he remembered Rich Dad's earlier advice. If you want to grow rich, you must become good at selling and communication. So, instead of quitting, he doubled down on learning. He read books, listened to tapes, studied top performers, and forced himself to make more calls. Within a few years, he became one of the top salespeople in his region. Then he did something that shocked his poor dad. He quit. From poor dad's point of view, Robert was finally making it, earning good money, with a strong company and a clear future. Why walk away now? Robert's answer was simple. He had extracted the skill he came for. The purpose of the job was to learn world-class sales and communication, and he had done that. Staying longer would only mean trading more time for money without increasing his freedom. It was time to move on and apply those skills to his own ventures. Rich Dad compared careers to apprenticeships. When you work only for money, you choose jobs based on who pays the most. When you work to learn, you choose jobs based on which skills they will teach you. One job might pay less, but expose you to sales, negotiation, and leadership. Another might pay more, but trap you in a narrow technical role where you never see the bigger picture. The rich are willing to temporarily earn less if it means gaining skills that will let them earn far more later, on their own terms. In this chapter, Kiyosaki highlights a handful of core skills he believes are essential for anyone who wants financial freedom. Sales and communication, the ability to persuade, present, and influence. Marketing, understanding how to attract attention and create demand. Management of cash flow, people, and systems. Investing, reading numbers, evaluating risk, and allocating capital. He notes that many highly educated people look down on sales or marketing. They see those fields as manipulative or beneath them. Yet in real life, almost every major career opportunity involves convincing someone of something: an employer, an investor, a customer, or even a partner. If you can't sell ideas, products, or yourself, your options remain narrow, no matter how intelligent you are. Robert tells a story about a young journalist who once asked him for advice on how to become a best-selling author. She had strong qualifications and good writing, but her books were not selling. When he suggested she take a sales course or work in sales for a while, she was offended. "I have a master's degree in writing," she said. "I don't want to become a salesperson." Robert calmly pointed out the difference between a best-selling author and a best-writing author. The market often rewards those who can sell and communicate, not just those who can produce good content in silence. Rich Dad's point was not that you should become a manipulative salesperson. His point was that you must be able to communicate value clearly and confidently if you want to escape dependency. Whether you're raising money for a project, convincing a seller to accept your terms, or explaining a new idea to your team, your financial future is tied to your ability to influence human beings. Working in roles that force you to practice this, no matter how uncomfortable at first, is one of the best investments you can make in yourself. Chapter 6 also digs into the emotional obstacles that stop people from working to learn. Fear of looking foolish. Fear of changing industries. Fear of starting over in an unfamiliar role. Many people would rather stay in a job they hate, earning a predictable income, than step into a role that stretches them, even if that role opens doors later. Rich Dad called this professional cowardice, hiding behind a title instead of developing yourself. The rich are not fearless, but they are more willing to feel temporary discomfort in exchange for long-term options. Another key theme in this chapter is ego versus growth. Poor Dad, proud of his academic credentials, sometimes rejected opportunities that felt beneath his status. Teaching at a certain school, taking a side role, or learning sales would have felt like a step down. Rich Dad, who never graduated from high school, had no such ego. He was happy to sweep floors, shadow lawyers, sit with bankers, or attend seminars if it meant adding a new tool to his mental toolbox. "My mind is my biggest asset," he would say. "If I keep educating it, money will always come." Kiyosaki encourages the listener to look at their own work history through this lens. In each job you've held, what did you actually learn that makes you more valuable now? If your answer is, "Nothing much, I just did my tasks," that's a sign you were working mainly for money, not for education. Going forward, he suggests asking a different set of questions before taking or staying in any role. What skills will this job teach me that I don't already have? Will these skills help me build or manage assets in the future? Does this role expose me to people, systems, or markets I want to understand better? If the answer is no across the board, you are probably stuck in a position that feeds your bills but not your future. By the end of Chapter 6, the pattern of the entire book becomes clearer. Each lesson is pushing you away from a life where you depend entirely on one paycheck, one employer, and one narrow skill, and to a life where you own assets, understand the rules of money, and possess a broad, powerful set of abilities. You still work hard, but now your work is chosen strategically. Every year, your skills grow, your confidence grows, and your options multiply. The final message of the chapter can be summed up like this. In the beginning, don't chase the highest salary. Chase the steepest learning curve. If you use your 20s and 30s to stack rare and valuable skills, sales, marketing, management, investing, you give your future self the tools to create money in many different ways. Then, when the time is right, you can stop working only for money and let money and your skills begin working for you. Chapter 7. Overcoming Obstacles. By now, Robert has shown that building wealth is not only about knowledge. Many people read the same books, attend the same seminars, and even understand the difference between assets and liabilities, yet they never act. They stay exactly where they are year after year. Why? In this chapter, Kiyosaki says the answer is simple and uncomfortable. The biggest barriers are not out there in the economy. They are inside our own minds. Even with financial literacy, most people are blocked by 5 inner obstacles: fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance. 1. Fear, the fear of losing money. Rich Dad told Robert, the primary difference between a rich person and a poor person is how they manage fear. Everyone is afraid of losing money. The difference is what you do with that fear. Most people let it paralyze them. They say, "I might lose, so I won't try." They keep their money in cash, avoid learning to invest, and then slowly lose purchasing power to inflation or missed opportunities. Winners feel the exact same fear, but they move anyway. They take calculated risks, knowing that some losses are inevitable, but also knowing that every loss can teach them something that makes them stronger. Kiyosaki compares this to Texans and their attitude toward oil drilling. In Texas culture, it's better to try, fail big, and get back up than to never drill at all. When they strike oil, they celebrate loudly. When they fail, they learn, reset, and keep going. Rich Dad wanted Robert to adopt that mindset about money. Failure was not something to be ashamed of. It was a tuition fee for real-world education. Failure inspires winners, he said. Failure defeats losers. 2. Cynicism, listening to doubts and naysayers. The second obstacle is cynicism, voices in your head and around you saying, "It won't work, the market is too risky, the economy is bad, you're too late." Cynics don't just protect themselves from danger. They blind themselves to opportunity. Rich Dad's rule was clear. Cynics criticize, winners analyze. Instead of asking, "What could go wrong?" and stopping there, winners ask, "What could go wrong? And how can I protect myself while I try?" Robert shares a painful example. He once found an excellent real estate deal in Phoenix, a property undervalued by tens of thousands of dollars, with strong rental demand. He showed the numbers to a friend. The friend was excited at first, but then spoke to a neighbor who said, "The market here is terrible. You'd be crazy to invest." The friend backed out. Robert went ahead, bought the property, and later made a large profit when prices recovered. The friend, influenced by second-hand fear instead of his own analysis, stayed stuck and resentful. The opportunity was there for both of them. Only one trusted his homework more than the neighborhood gossip. 3. Laziness. Busy, but with the wrong things. The third obstacle is laziness, but not the obvious, lying on the couch kind. Kiyosaki says modern laziness often disguises itself as busyness. People say, "I'm too busy to learn about investing, to review their finances, to start a side project, or to look at property." They fill their day with urgent tasks, emails, errands, social media, while avoiding the important work of building assets and planning their future. At the end of the month, they say, "I just don't have time." But the truth is that they don't have priorities. Rich Dad had an unusual cure for laziness, a little controlled greed. Not greed in the sense of hurting others, but a healthy desire for a better life. When you allow yourself to say, "I want more for my family. I want freedom. I want to travel, give, and live fully," that desire can wake you up. What kills initiative is the phrase, "I can't afford it." Rich Dad forbade those words in his house. He believed that when you say, "I can't afford it," your brain shuts down. When you ask, "How can I afford it?" your brain starts working. The question pulls you into action instead of excuses. 4. Bad habits. Paying everyone else first. The fourth obstacle is bad habits, especially around how you treat yourself. Poor Dad had the habit of paying everyone else first, the government, the bank, the utility companies, and paying himself last, if anything was left. There was rarely anything left. Rich Dad did the opposite. He paid himself first. Every month, he set aside money for his investment accounts before paying bills. If he came up short for taxes or creditors, he felt pressure. That pressure pushed him to think creatively, do extra deals, or cut waste. Over time, this habit made him stronger and richer. Kiyosaki admits this approach sounds risky. What if you can't pay your bills? Rich Dad's answer: that fear is exactly what forces you to grow. Of course, he wasn't telling people to ignore their responsibilities or get into legal trouble. He meant that you should treat your financial future as non-negotiable. When you pay yourself first, putting money into assets and education, you send a message to your own mind: my freedom matters. Then you rise to meet the challenge of covering everything else. If you always pay yourself last, there is never anything left. 5. Arrogance. Thinking you already know enough. The final obstacle is arrogance, which Rich Dad defined as ego covering ignorance. When people don't understand something, instead of admitting "I don't know," they dismiss it as stupid, risky, or boring. They mock investing or say that's not for people like us, or pretend they're above learning sales, taxes, or markets. Arrogance is expensive. It keeps you out of great opportunities simply because you're unwilling to be a beginner. Kiyosaki admits that he too has lost money when he let arrogance override curiosity. The cure, he says, is humility plus education. Whenever you feel defensive or dismissive about a financial topic, crypto, real estate, business, stocks, ask yourself, am I rejecting this because I truly understand it, or because I don't want to feel ignorant? If it's the second, the rich person's response is to buy a book, attend a class, or talk to someone smarter. The poor person's response is to make a joke and walk away. In closing this chapter, Kiyosaki emphasizes that technical knowledge about money is actually the easy part. The hard part is managing your own inner world. your fear, doubt, laziness, habits, and pride. Two people can read the same book and live in the same economy. One becomes wealthier every year, the other stays stuck. The difference is not the external conditions. It is which inner obstacles they are willing to confront. Those who face these 5 enemies head-on and keep learning and acting in spite of them gradually build the asset column that carries them out of the rat race. Chapter 8. Getting Started. There is gold everywhere. At this point in the journey, most listeners have the same question. Okay, I understand the ideas, assets, liabilities, cash flow, fear, habits, but how do I actually start? What do I do tomorrow morning? Kiyosaki begins this chapter by admitting something important. Acquiring wealth was not easy for him either. He made mistakes, lost money, and felt fear many times. But he also discovered a simple truth. There is gold everywhere. Most people are just not trained to see it. He explains that starting is less about finding the perfect first investment and more about training your brain to look at the world differently. Most people are trained from childhood to look for jobs, sales, and discounts. The financially educated train themselves to look for mispriced assets, inefficient systems, struggling businesses with potential, undervalued properties, and ways to add value that others have missed. This ability doesn't come from being born special. It comes from a set of attitudes and habits practiced consistently. Kiyosaki then shares 10 guiding ideas he uses to wake up his financial genius and move from theory to action. They're not strict rules, but mental tools you can apply every day. 1. Find a reason greater than reality. The first step is emotional, not technical. To keep going when things get tough, you need a reason to become financially free that is bigger than your fears and excuses. For Kiyosaki, it was a deep desire for freedom, to live life on his own terms, travel the world with his wife, and not be controlled by bosses or bills. For others, it might be providing security for their family, supporting a cause, or never repeating a childhood filled with financial anxiety. He suggests writing this reason down in clear, emotional language. When you feel tired, scared, or tempted to give up, you reread it. Without a powerful why, it's too easy to drift back into the comfort of the rat race. 2. Make daily choices that match your goals. Wealth is not built by one huge decision. It is built by thousands of small, quiet choices. Every day you choose what to read, who to listen to, how to use your time, and where to put each dollar. Most people say they want financial freedom, but still choose entertainment over education, consumption over saving, and comfort over growth. Kiyosaki urges you to start noticing those micro-choices. Did you spend that hour on social media or reading about investing? Did you buy another liability? Or did you move one step closer to buying an asset? Over months and years, these tiny decisions create a massive gap between people who started from the same place. 3. Choose your friends carefully. Rich Dad taught Robert that you don't have to choose friends based on how much money they have, but you must be conscious of how they think and speak about money. Spend all your time with people who complain about the economy, blame the government, or mock investors, and you will absorb their mindset. Spend time with people who look for solutions, study deals, and talk about building assets, and your own standards will rise. Kiyosaki intentionally stayed close to people who were ahead of him financially. Instead of feeling jealous, he treated their success as proof that the game could be won. Their normal became his new target. 4. Master one formula, then learn a new one. In school, we memorize formulas for passing exams, then forget them. In the real world, formulas are patterns for making money. For example, buy undervalued assets, improve them, sell, or refinance. Or create a product once, distribute digitally, earn royalties repeatedly. At first, you don't need 1,000 strategies. You need one basic formula that works, even on a small scale. Study it, test it with tiny amounts, refine it, and only then move on to another. Many people jump from idea to idea without ever mastering anything. The rich tend to go deep, becoming very good at a handful of money-making patterns and repeating them. 5. Pay yourself first, no matter what. This principle returns from earlier chapters, but now as a practical rule. Every month, before paying your bills, set aside a portion of your income for assets and financial education. Even if it's small at first, 5 or 10%, the habit matters more than the amount. You will feel pressure when bills are due and your savings are locked away. That pressure is intentional. It forces you to think creatively about increasing income, cutting waste, or making a small deal. If you always wait to see what is left over, you will never invest, because there is never anything left. Pay yourself first is the discipline that feeds your future, not just your present comfort. 6. Pay your brokers and advisors well. Many people try to save every possible fee. They choose the cheapest lawyer, the cheapest accountant, and avoid professional advice altogether. Rich Dad did the opposite. He paid his financial experts generously, but only those who made him money. A great accountant can save you far more in taxes than they cost. A sharp broker can alert you to opportunities you would never see alone. The rule is, don't be cheap with people who help you build and protect your asset column. Instead, demand competence and results. If they perform, reward them and stay loyal. If they do not, replace them. You are building a team, not trying to do everything yourself. 7. Be an Indian giver. Recover your capital quickly. Kiyosaki uses an old phrase from American history, Indian giver, to describe a key investing habit. Structure deals so you get your original money back as soon as possible, while still keeping control of the asset. For example, you might buy a small property, improve it, then refinance so that you pull out your initial cash and some profit, yet keep owning the asset, which now pays for itself. Or you invest in a small business, recover your stake from early profits, and stay on as a shareholder. In these cases, once your original money is back in your pocket, your risk drops dramatically, but your asset continues to generate cash flow. Rich Dad loved deals where he could own an infinite return, because with his own capital out, his remaining position cost him nothing. 8. Use assets to buy luxuries. In the average household, luxuries are bought first, on credit, and sometimes as a way to relieve stress. A new phone, a bigger car, a holiday you can't quite afford. Rich Dad's formula was different. First acquire assets, then let the cash flow from those assets pay for luxuries. Kiyosaki gives examples of how he and his wife wanted a fancy car or a trip. Instead of dipping into savings or taking loans, they set a rule. We will buy this once we own an asset that pays us enough each month to cover it. That rule forced them to stay focused on acquiring cash-flowing investments. When the luxury finally arrived, it was a celebration of their assets, not a weight on their shoulders. 9. Choose heroes and learn from them. Heroes compress learning. When Kiyosaki was studying investing, he picked role models, people like Warren Buffett in stocks or local property investors in real estate. Rather than copying them blindly, he studied how they thought, what rules they followed, and how they reacted during crises. Heroes make success feel more achievable. If someone else has already done what you dream of, it proves that the path exists. Your job is not to worship them, but to decode their patterns and adapt them to your own scale and context. 10. Teach and you shall receive. Finally, Rich Dad believed that teaching others what you are learning strengthens your own understanding and attracts more opportunities. When you explain a concept, cash flow, assets, liability, to a friend, child, or colleague, you are forced to clarify it in your own mind. That clarity makes you a better investor. Kiyosaki noticed that whenever he shared his knowledge openly, through small talks, classes, or later through books, new partners, deals, and ideas seemed to appear. Generosity with information did not reduce his opportunities. It multiplied them. The more he taught, the more he learned, and the more confident he became in applying his own principles. In the closing pages of Chapter 8, the message is straightforward. You will never feel completely ready. The best time to start was years ago. The second best time is now. You begin not with a perfect plan, but with a clear reason, a commitment to daily learning, and small, concrete actions. Reading numbers, analyzing simple deals, saving a percentage, talking to experienced people, and maybe trying one tiny investment. There is gold everywhere, Kiyosaki says, but most people are not trained to see it. This chapter is your invitation to start that training, not next year, not when the economy is perfect, but with the very next financial decision you make. Chapter 9. Still want more? Here are some to dose. After spending an entire book changing how you think about money, Kiyosaki ends with a simple challenge. If you still want more freedom, more options, more control over your life, then you must turn ideas into action. Reading about assets, liabilities, fear, and cash flow is not enough. The world is full of people who agree with these concepts and still stay broke. The difference between those who stay in the rat race and those who leave it is not intelligence. It is action. Or, as he puts it, action always beats inaction. He acknowledges that many readers might see the earlier 10 steps in the book as philosophies, interesting but vague. So in this final chapter, he gets more concrete. He lists specific behaviors and habits anyone can start using, even with limited money, to train their financial intelligence and move toward wealth. These aren't magic tricks. They are practical ways to rewire your daily life so that looking for opportunities becomes automatic. 1. Stop doing what isn't working. The first to do is deceptively simple. Stop doing what you're doing if it isn't working. Many people work harder at the same failing strategy. More overtime, more loans, more trying to save tiny amounts, hoping that intensity will solve what is essentially a direction problem. Kiyosaki compares this to insanity, doing the same thing over and over while expecting a different result. If your current path hasn't moved you toward freedom in the last 5 or 10 years, it probably won't in the next 10 either. He suggests taking a pause to examine your financial life honestly. Are you any closer to being able to stop working? Is your asset column stronger than 5 years ago? If the answer is no, then some of your routines, how you spend, save, work, or invest, need to change. That change might be uncomfortable, but staying stuck is worse. 2. Look for new ideas. The second to do is to deliberately feed your mind with new financial ideas. Most people hear the same conversations every day: complaints about prices, gossip about jobs, fear about the economy. If you want different results, you need different information. Kiyosaki encourages reading widely: books on investing, biographies of entrepreneurs, case studies of deals, not just social media and mainstream headlines. New ideas don't automatically make you rich, but they expand your mental toolbox. When you later encounter a property, a small business, or a market movement, your brain can connect it to something you've already studied. That's how opportunities start to appear in your awareness. They were always there, but now you have concepts to recognize them. 3. Find someone who has already done it. One of the fastest shortcuts to progress is mentorship. Instead of trying to reinvent every wheel alone, Kiyosaki suggests finding people who have already achieved what you want. Whether that's owning rental properties, building an online business, or living off dividends, and asking questions. He shares stories of times he learned directly from more experienced investors, taking them to lunch, asking them to walk him through a deal, or shadowing them in negotiations. The key is humility and value. Come prepared, respect their time, and, where possible, offer something in return, even if it's just helping with research or legwork. Heroes and mentors make the path real. 4. Take classes, read, and attend seminars. Kiyosaki repeatedly emphasizes self-education. Traditional school gave him little about money, so he and his wife invested heavily in courses, workshops, and training. Friends who refused to spend money on education often stayed stuck in the same jobs for decades. Those who took classes on real estate, sales, business law, taxes, unlocked new income streams. He doesn't claim every seminar is good. Some are overpriced or shallow. The point is to develop a habit of budgeting time and money for learning, just as you budget for rent or food. Over years, that accumulated knowledge gives you an edge in spotting and executing deals that others can't even evaluate. 5. Make lots of offers. One of the most practical habits he shares is this: make lots of offers. When Kiyosaki wants to buy real estate, he doesn't just look at 1 or 2 properties and wait for the perfect price. He looks at many properties and makes many offers, often lower than the asking price, but justified by his analysis. Most offers are rejected. That's expected. But sometimes a motivated seller says yes, and that's where profit is hidden. He tells of helping a friend and her broker who wanted to buy an apartment building. They found several options, but were afraid to make low offers, thinking it would be rude. In the end, they did nothing and missed all the deals. Kiyosaki contrasts this with his own approach. There is no right price until you put an offer on the table and see how the other side responds. Fear of rejection keeps many would-be investors silent. The rich treat no as data, not as humiliation. 6. Walk or drive an area regularly. To train his eye for bargains, Kiyosaki developed a habit. Pick a neighborhood and walk or drive through it for 10 to 15 minutes once a month. Look at for sale signs, note vacant lots or buildings, track which properties stay on the market too long. Over time, you build an internal map of prices and patterns. When something suddenly looks underpriced, you'll notice it immediately because you've been watching the area. He applies the same principle to other markets, browsing business for sale listings, checking specific stock sectors, or scanning online marketplaces. The goal is not to obsess, but to stay familiar enough that real bargains stand out against the noise. 7. Shop for bargains in every market. Kiyosaki believes that every market, stocks, real estate, businesses, even collectibles, always has mispriced opportunities. In any economic condition, someone is under pressure to sell and someone else is willing to buy. Instead of saying, the market is too high or the market is too low, he asks, where are the motivated sellers? Where is fear biggest and value still solid? This doesn't mean chasing every deal advertised online. It means doing the boring work of comparing numbers, checking rents, reading balance sheets, and talking to people. If you consistently look for value, eventually you will find something that fits your criteria. And because you've practiced, you'll recognize it in time to act. 8. Look in the right places. Many people say there are no opportunities, but they never leave their comfort zones. They talk to the same colleagues, visit the same websites, and shop at the same stores. Kiyosaki reminds readers that deals rarely come knocking on your front door. They live in investor meetups, specialized forums, industry events, and circles where people actually talk about buying and selling assets. If you're interested in real estate, spend time with investors and agents who do deals regularly. If you're drawn to online business, join communities of entrepreneurs. You're not just looking for one magic tip. You're immersing yourself in an environment where talking about money, assets, and strategy is normal. 9. Find the buyer first, then the seller. One advanced tactic Kiyosaki shares is to find people who want to buy something first: land, property, a type of business. Then go out and locate what they're looking for. Once you find it, you can structure the deal so you keep a piece for yourself for free. He gives an example of a friend who wanted to buy land but had no time to search. Kiyosaki found a larger parcel, negotiated a contract, and then sold a portion of it to his friend, using that cash to effectively finance his own remaining share. By thinking bigger, buying the whole pie and selling slices, he turned a simple request into a profitable deal for both of them. 10. Think big and learn from history. Kiyosaki ends the list with two linked ideas. First, think bigger than what you can personally afford right now. Instead of asking, "What can I buy with the little money I have?" ask, "How can I control something valuable using partners, creative financing, or better terms?" This doesn't mean reckless leverage. It means refusing to limit your imagination to your current bank balance. Second, he encourages learning from history, both economic history and your own. Markets rise and fall. Technologies change. Entire industries appear and disappear. But the patterns of fear, greed, boom, and bust repeat. By studying previous cycles and your own past mistakes, you can avoid being surprised every time the world shifts. The people who prosper are those who expect change and position themselves ahead of it. In the final pages, Kiyosaki circles back to the core of the book. Every dollar that passes through your hands is a vote for your future. Spend it mindlessly on liabilities, and you are choosing the path of the poor. Spend it on a bigger lifestyle only, and you are choosing the path of the middle class. Impressive on the outside, fragile on the inside. Invest it in your mind and in real assets, and you are choosing the path of the rich. He reminds you that no government, school, or employer will do this work for you. Your financial future and your children's will be shaped by the small, consistent actions you take after the book is closed. The books you read, the offers you make, the deals you analyze, the skills you practice, and the assets you quietly accumulate. The principles are simple. The tools are available. What remains is the decision to act. Epilogue. The choice is in your hands. As this journey with Rich Dad and Poor Dad comes to a close, Robert reminds you why he told these stories in the first place. It was never to glorify money for its own sake, or to make anyone feel ashamed of their background. It was to show that financial intelligence can be learned, and that learning it changes everything about how you live, work, and dream. Two fathers, with two different philosophies, created two very different futures. The question now is not which father was right for Robert, but which voice you will follow in your own life. Poor Dad's path is familiar and socially approved. Go to school, get good grades, find a safe job, buy a house, work hard, save a little, and hope retirement will somehow work out. Millions walk this road with good intentions and honest effort, yet still end up worried about bills, pensions, and unexpected emergencies. Rich Dad's path is less common and less comfortable. Learn how money really works, build assets, face your fears, and take responsibility for your own financial education. It does not promise an easy life, but it does offer something priceless: the possibility of freedom. Robert emphasizes that nothing magical happened to him. He wasn't born rich, he didn't always make the right decisions, and he certainly wasn't spared from failure. What made the difference was that he chose to keep learning and keep acting. He bought small properties before big ones, made small mistakes before larger successes, and treated every loss as tuition rather than as a verdict. Over time, his asset column grew strong enough that work became a choice, not a necessity. That same slow, sometimes frustrating, but deeply rewarding path is open to anyone willing to think differently and move consistently. He also shares one more story about a friend who wanted to pay for his child's college education. Instead of saving in a traditional way, the friend used the principles from this book. He bought a small investment property, improved it, refinanced to pull his original money back, and let the ongoing cash flow accumulate in a fund for his child. Years later, that one intentional decision grew into hundreds of thousands of dollars, more than enough for college, with the property itself still producing income. The point is not that everyone must copy this exact strategy, but that assets can solve life problems in ways that a paycheck alone never will. In his final reflection, Robert points to the title of another classic book, Think and Grow Rich, not Work Hard and Grow Rich. Thinking, developing your financial mind, is what changes the results of your work. You have been given two great gifts, your mind and your time. How you use them will determine whether money controls you or you control money. With every unit of currency that passes through your hands, you quietly make a choice. Spend it carelessly, and you vote for a future of scarcity. Spend it on liabilities and status, and you vote for the anxious comfort of the middle class. Invest it in your mind and in real assets, and you vote for wealth and independence. No government, employer, or school will make these choices for you. They cannot. This responsibility and this power belongs only to you. You can close this audiobook, go back to life as usual, and let the days blur into each other. Or you can decide that today is the first day you begin to build your own rich dad story by tracking your cash flow, paying yourself first, studying one asset class seriously, and taking one small, real step toward ownership. Your children and the people who watch you will learn more from what you do with money than from anything you ever say about it. If you choose to share these ideas with them and live them out yourself, you are giving them a gift far more valuable than an allowance or a toy. You are giving them a way to navigate a world where money touches almost every decision. In the end, this book does not promise that everyone will become a millionaire. It promises something better, that if you train your mind, act with courage, and treat money as a servant instead of a master, your life can be freer, your options wider, and your impact greater. The lessons are now yours. What you do with them from this day forward is the real story.